Thomas Randle finished 5th in the 2024 championship, but that's not illustrative of his season. It makes it seem like he's a lot closer to Cam Waters than he actually was. There was a 500-point gap between Thomas Randle and Cam Waters in the championship. The season-long battle for 5th demonstrated the inconsistency of the 4 drivers vying for the position. Guys like Jimmy Golding, Matt Payne, and Nick Percat. So those 4 guys were all inconsistent across the year. They had their moments, but they weren't able to close the gap to the front runners. The guys who were more consistent were guys like Cam Waters, Chaz Mostert, Brock Feeney, and Will Brown. Chaz Mostert may be less consistent, but had less stinkers, that's for sure. Cam Waters had less stinkers, but part of that's his ability to qualify the car into a better position. And while Thomas Randle did have a good year and 5th in the championship, demonstrated that his bad races were in low-scoring races compared to 2023. In 2023, he had a bad Sandown, so he scored very few points. He would come lower than 20th in sprint races, not in the Grand Prix like what happened this year. Because if you have a look at the numbers, Tommy got 12 top 10s, he got a 2nd place at Gold Coast, podium at City Motorsport Park and Adelaide. Last year, he had 1 more podium, courtesy to that strong weekend at Tail and Bend last year, and the podium at Adelaide. Yeah, so 24 races this year. It's a slightly more condensed championship. And he had a pretty smooth but unspectacular enduro campaign. 13th at Sandown, 11th at Bathurst. They just didn't have the pace. There's probably going to be a fair bit of hype about Tommy Randle for next year. There's a little bit of work that needs to be done. Whatever happened at the Grand Prix this year, he was on struggle street. Obviously, we don't expect Thomas Randle to be beating Cam Waters, but at some stage we'd be hoping to see them pretty evenly matched. It didn't take too long for Cam Waters to be... Well, it took a few years to get close to Chaz Mostert and Mark Winterbottom. By the time he hit that level, Frosty was gone. By the time he was at the level that he's at now, he was the lead driver. Impressive at times, but at other times disappointing. Obviously, Tickford struggled at the start of the year. They had a really rubbish first round at Bathurst, where Tommy Randle's 4th place was the only top 10, and Tommy out-qualified Cam at both races. At the Grand Prix, though, Cam Waters got a pole position and started qualifying and racing better and getting more top 10s, while Tommy Randle struggled. Cam got his qualifying pace back, and then once they had that, they could just chase the race pace, and then they got it at Perth and had a decent car for most of the year. Tommy's not at the level that Cam Waters is. Would it be too much to expect Randle to be at Waters' level next year? So in 2019, in Cam's 4th year, he was almost as good as Will Davison. It'd be hard to say, because Cam did get a pole position at Townsville. Not as many top 10s, but he did beat Will Davo in the championship. Obviously not as good as Chaz Mostert, because Chaz is just crazy good. From 2020 onwards, Cam's been performing really, really well. For 2025, Thomas Randle, I don't think it'll be fair to expect that. I think that we should be maybe expecting a similar level to what... It'd be close. It'd be like a few top 10s away, but not that close. So if he was to do this year again, let's say he'd be, he'd have 16 top 10s next year if he improved his craft. The team said that they sort of struggled to get everything lined up the way they needed to at the start of the year, because they'd been running 4 cars for such a long time, which is an interesting excuse to have, and maybe there is some sense to it. But I don't think we should expect Tommy to be in the top 5 again in 2025. But you've always got to ask why not. So that's I'd have to come up with some data and some digging to really argue my case on that one. But yeah, I just think that Tommy's 5th in the championship is a lot more luck-based. His chief opposition didn't do as good a job as him at the time in those 4 races. And while he was nowhere near the top 4 guys, and at that point he just sort of dumped too many points, and Grove Racing, Premier Racing, Matt Stone Racing hadn't done a good enough job. And those are the 3 lead drivers of those teams. Jimmy Golding, I think a lot of the cases the team isn't quite there, but when Jimmy punches, he punches hard. Same sort of deal with Percat. The MSR car was pretty strong in 2024. They had a few absolute shocker rounds. Taupo and Townsville. Bad Sandown and a bad Bathurst because Dylan O'Keefe crashed a car. They had a crash at Gold Coast as well, where they had to put a front bar from Cam Hill's car on the car. Maybe Matt Stone Racing would do a better job in 2025 than Grove Racing. I'm not sure if I'd expect Premier to do a better job, but they need to have a lot more consistency because it's pretty up and down. It was pretty up and down all the time, and it didn't feel like they really had what it would take to come fifth in the championship. But if Thomas Randle can do it, then Matt Payne, Jimmy Golding and Nick Percat can probably do it too. They just needed things to go their way a bit more.